Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the Group of Five Deep Dive. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined by my co-host Mike Iannello. We affectionately refer to the NFL draft as graduation day for our former G5 heroes, and we have a lot of G5 studs to fawn over in this episode. That's why we're breaking it into two. This podcast is going to be rolled out in two separate installments. The first, which you're listening to right now, is our examination of potential first and second round G5ers, and the second episode will focus on third rounders all the way into the undrafted free agent realm. So make sure to listen, subscribe, like, comment separately in those two episodes. And when we look back at last spring, it was a really good episode series for us because we hit on some big players from the G5 ranks moving up to the NFL. That was Tank Dell, Tyjae Spears. We let the world know that if Puka Nacua could stay healthy, he could be a starter right away in the NFL, and he was a star for the Rams in year one. But before we jump to our commencement speaker here on graduation day, that being Toledo's Quinyon Mitchell, what do you think of this year's crop, Iannello, compared to last year's?
Yeah, Quinyon, our valedictorian. It's good. If you remember last year, did we have anybody we could talk about when did the first G5 guy go? I don't remember off the top of my head, but I remember us talking about it on the pod that there was not going to be one in the first two rounds. Was Rashee Rice the first?
I believe Rashee Rice was the first one. He was at the end of the second round, yeah.
Okay, so we got four or five guys to talk about this episode, so I'm very happy. I think another thing we've talked about a lot here, which you're kind of seeing it this year. I think it helps guys is the NIL, is keeping Pratt in school another year, keeping obviously Mitchell came back for another year and he probably could have left. So I think it's cool where we get the benefit as the G5 guys that these guys stay in college another year, and it helps them. It honestly helps their draft stock because they have another year to get better. And then I mean you still see it. There's guys obviously we wish we could be talking about Gene T and guys like that who are now coming back that we'll get to talk about next year. So I'm excited. I think it's a lot better of a G5 crop than we had last year. So I'm excited to talk about them.
Yeah, I certainly think it's deeper. Hopefully it's as impactful on the field this fall. But let's get started. As I mentioned, Quinyon Mitchell, our valedictorian, our commencement speaker, the cornerback out of Toledo. It looks like he is going to be a first-round draft pick probably in the first half of the first round. But let's go through his resume a little bit. 4-year starter for Jason Candle over at Toledo. He's the Rockets' all-time leader in career pass breakups with 46. He also became the first Rocket since 1971 to be named an All-American in back-to-back seasons by at least one outlet. And last year, they tested him a lot in 2022, which was a bad idea. He had 5 picks, 2 pick sixes, 3.5 tackles for loss, helping out in run support. This year, teams didn't throw at him as much, but he still maintained an absurdly high breakup rate. The PBU department finished with 1.46 breakups per game. That was second nationally. He was targeted 132 times over the last 2 seasons, allowed just 54 catches. That translated to back-to-back 91.5 plus grades from PFF at a position that it needs to be noted, very difficult to maintain a high level of success because sometimes when they're not picking on you as much, the scoring system doesn't benefit you, but Mitchell remained at that super elite level. One of the stats that we're going to throw around, relative athletic score. It's the RAS card. It basically is your physical breakdown, your agility, your measurements at the combine or pro day. They put it all together into one score. It's rated out of 10. He had 9.75 out of 10 on the RAS score. And I think that really solidified him as a top first round selection. Certainly at this point, the number one corner on the board, he is minus money to be selected first. He's about minus 125, minus 150 to be the first corner to come out of this class. And finally, for his actual measurables, 6 feet, 195 pounds, decent size, 4.33 40-yard dash. That's what's going to get him paid the big bucks, 38-inch vertical to go along with that. And another element of this is sometimes there's skeptics that say you're playing at the G5 level, you're playing a lot of tin cans, so how are you going to play up in those opportunities? When you go to the Senior Bowl, that's when you can make your money. He looked a lot better in man-to-man coverage, and I think that was the only gripe in terms of his film. Played a lot of off coverage at Toledo, which you're not going to do in the NFL. But when he had the opportunity to go up against Power 5 guys, it looked like he belonged the entire time through the practices, through the game. So I think he really locked himself into being the number one corner in this class. So from a betting perspective, I still think there's value all the way up to minus 200 to take him to be the first corner. His draft position is at 15.5 in the market, but it's heavily juiced for under. So if you think he's going to go in those top 15, you're probably going to have to lay minus 160, minus 175. I don't think that's as good a bet as him being the first corner. So that's where I'm putting my money. money. And a big part of this too is I want to keep track of the public perception. A lot of these mock drafts, there's an NFL mock draft database online. It's free to everybody. It aggregates over 1,100 mock drafts. He's coming off the board as an average pick of 15th to Indianapolis. I actually think he goes earlier than that. So this is where I am on Mitchell. I'd love to hear your takes on somebody who, we watched a lot of Toledo football. Wasn't his fault that they laid an egg in the MAC title game, an opportunity to go to the Fiesta Bowl. Jason Candle in a big spot lets his fan base down again. But he always does a great job of putting talent on the field. So in this case, he made sure to get a player like Mitchell on the field, kept him for an extra year, as you indicated as well. And I think he's the beneficiary of it. So he's our graduation speaker here. What are your thoughts on Mitchell?
Yeah, you read through all the stats, the passes defended, the interceptions too. The other thing too that I just love too is not only was he super productive, but I'm not someone who values like the pro day, the combine, all that stuff, but like he has an NFL body. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, like he measured like an NFL guy. The big stat too that you didn't even mention, he didn't commit a single penalty last year, and he committed one the year before. So for a guy that is an elite ball hawk, outstanding anticipation, great ball skills, he is always around the ball. He doesn't get there early. He, like I said, one penalty over the last 2 years. So that's a big thing. And, you mentioned the biggest knock on him is he plays in the MAC, doesn't face a lot of elite receivers. I think what helps Quinyon Mitchell is that same argument was made about Sauce Gardner, who is immediately the best corner in the NFL. And that was what people said about Sauce, was like, oh, he played in the AAC. They're like, okay, but he's elite. And I think that'll help. And that'll help kind of deter that. Like, get the ball. I don't care who's throwing it. When the ball's in the air, he gets there. So I'm with you. I absolutely love Quinyon Mitchell. I love the odds. When you said that 125, 150, it's hard for us in PA. We can't bet the draft, so it's like not as easy for us to find draft odds lines as you guys. So if you're listening, I mean, if you can get a 125 on him to be the first corner, hammer it. If you can, I'm with you. 150, I'd still take it. I mean, it's basically the two Alabama guys are kind of his. He's Cooper DeJean's not getting drafted before him, and then it's like probably Terrion Arnold is like he probably goes second. Yeah, I love Mitchell. I think he is an NFL ready starter right away, and he should be the first corner off the board.
All right, the next player on our hit list here who is projected to go in the second round. This is a lot different because you look at the statistical accomplishments of Mitchell, and then you stay in the MAC and you look at Marshawn Kneeland's Western Michigan defensive tackle, defensive end hybrid, probably because of his size, is going to have to slide out to be an edge rusher in the NFL. He's consistently mocked here in the second round out of G5 land because of his potential, his tools. He's toolsy. He's got the traits. He's got the motor. But he didn't have the big stats or film against big-time opponents, although he did have one sack against Iowa. But I'm not, basing my projections on him based on him eating up one left tackle against one of the worst Power 5 offenses.
Well, who was the sacking? What quarterback did he sack? Because if he brought down the what the hell is his name? The big guy that was playing at the end of the year, the like 305-pound quarterback they had rolling out there at the end of the year. If he brought him down, that's like a sack and a half. I mean, if he was bringing down what's his face, the former Michigan guy, then I don't know if I'm giving him that much credit for sacking him.
So he did play in 9 games last year. He finished with a career high in tackles, 57, 4.5 sacks, 7.5 tackles for loss, 2 forced fumbles, 8 quarterback hurries. All of it was good enough for second team All MAC. But as I mentioned, it's all about his potential and his measurables. His RAS score was off the charts, 99th percentile in the shuttle and the 3-cone drill and 40-yard dash out of the position group. To me, a little bit, all of that. Maybe it's because I'm an Eagles fan. I got the Eagles hat on right now. I'm having a little PTSD to Mike Mamula, somebody who's like, trust us. The guy has all the measurables. He didn't have quite the, breakout experience in college, but he's ready to turn that corner. He's mocked 50th in these aggregate drafts. I still think that's a little bit high for a guy to come out of the MAC. Like, I want to see somebody at this level dominate. And yes, he has the size to move out to D end, because he can't play D tackle. He's like, less than 270 pounds. That's not going to play in the NFL. So to move to a new position full time, yes, he did play some D end and on the edge at Western, but I wouldn't take him in the second round. I think it's interesting that because of this draft class being a little bit thin in the second to third round at this particular position, which is a premium position, I think that's what's inflating his value. But from value perspective, if my team were to take him in the second round, I'd be a bit disappointed. What are your thoughts on Kneeland? Someone who we didn't really talk about all that much in terms of the season for a team that we like to get into action, but the guy just wasn't popping off the page statistically.
That's what I was gonna say, and that would be a common theme for these two podcasts. Is like if you listen to us every year, for the last 2 years, we've said Quinyon Mitchell's name 75 times. How many times have we said Marshawn Kneeland? Like probably once or twice. Like you mentioned it. Like I want a guy who's dominating at this level, and you mentioned he's got the size, he's got great hands, he's got long arms. When you look at the NFL today, him kicking out to edge. He doesn't have that elite pass rush bend and speed of like a Micah Parsons, a Joey Bosa, bend the corner coming off the edge. He does a really good job at bullying blockers. He's more of that, Fletcher Cox just kind of run through you type of pass rushers. I agree. I think he could be productive. He's athletic. He's strong. I'm with you. I also think just, we're only going to talk G5. This is a super interesting draft in general for edge rushers. I think I've looked at a lot of mock drafts that have edge rushers all over the place. I've talked to friends about, asking me where I think guys should go. And I think the first round is going to dictate where he goes. And I have no idea how the first round is going to go. Because you have Latu from UCLA, who's a freak and has all the talent to be a top 10 pick, but you have the medical history. So like if he slides because of the history, and then you have the where does Dallas Turner go? Chop Robinson is another guy who probably has the talent and like measurables to be a top 15 pick, but doesn't have like the sack production at Penn State. We're like, okay, if Chop Robinson falls to 25, Marshawn Kneeland, that's just kicking all the edge rushers down the board. So I think you'll know after day one kind of if he has a chance, because if Turner and Latu and Robinson and Jared Verse all go kind of in those first 20-ish picks, maybe then Kneeland could slide up into the second round. But I think if you start to see Latu go 15 and Chop go 24, and then you're probably saying Kneeland's falling in the third round. So if you are looking to bet him, I would say you'll kind of know after the first round based on where the scale goes, because I think those four guys could really go anywhere in the first round. So I'm very interested to see. That's what I'm most excited for of the first round, is where those four go. And that'll kind of determine where Kneeland goes, I think.
So we go from one player in the G5 ranks that we didn't talk about all that much to someone who's in the pseudo G5, which was UConn. And we were actually able to mention an interior lineman. That's how good Christian Haynes was.
Yeah, we talked about a lot.
Yeah, he was somebody who it's clear you don't have to be an X's and O's expert to watch a UConn team that at least 2 years ago, their bread and butter as they had that turnaround was running the football. And he was somebody who you could use him pulling, you could use him in the screen game. He was so athletic and really made that offense go to a certain degree. Yes, he does not have ideal size, but because of the speed and agility he put, down in his measurables, according to evaluators at least, that is going to be enough to get him into the second round. And I agree, but I want to say this. Pennsylvania, you can't bet NFL draft, live, certainly on draft day, but a lot of states you can, and they'll have, next player to go. Here's the key name to hear in relation to Haynes, in my opinion. It's Cooper Beebe from K-State. Once he goes, Haynes will be the top, guard at every war room in the NFL at that position. So if you see a live number on him or him to go in the second round, I think that's when it starts to get taken seriously, because BB could be at the very top of the second round. I understand that guard isn't a premium position by NFL evaluators and the teams themselves, but to get somebody who's such a plug and play kind of guy who could come in as a rookie and start for a lot of teams in the NFL, I see him coming off the board in the second round, and I want to try to take advantage of a live number. That's my thought on the guard out of UConn. I know this is a team and a program that you like to be someone who basically pumps them up a little bit. It was a difficult year for the Huskies on the gridiron. What are your thoughts on him?
I feel like we could have been talking about Haynes as a potential first round pick if he came out of the draft last year. I mean, he's coming off an All-American season. I think he dominated last year. The run game was awesome. And, we'll talk about it at the next pod with Jackson Mitchell too. I think a lot of the UConn guys, like UConn just had a bad year. And I think it really hurt Haynes. His production wasn't as good, was not on the All-American ballot as he was last year. He just wasn't as good. But you mentioned it. His bread and butter is his athleticism for guard. I think I don't really know enough about NFL schemes to tell you like where, but you look at, a team that's going to use, that does a lot of run schemes with pulling guards. I think he'll fit perfect. Obviously, this is an absurd comparison, but like the way the Eagles maximize Jason Kelsey's athleticism by having the guard pull constantly. Like, I don't think he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but like that kind of system where because Kelsey was small and stuff, fast. Like if you use Haynes correctly, I think he'd be very good. He knows how to play his angles. He's really smart. What he lacks for length, he's managed to make up for it with his athleticism, his football IQ, being in the right spot, playing the angles. So I think he'll be an NFL starter for a long time. And I agree with you. I think, he probably goes in that round 2 to 3 mark. And if he came out last year, he probably goes even higher. So I still really like Christian Haynes.
All right, we took our medicine. We talked interior lineman on defense, interior lineman on offense. Let's talk some fun skill position. Malachi Corley. He's on the borderline. Will he be a second-round pick? Will he be a third-round pick? The Western Kentucky wide receiver, or as I like to call him, the Yak King. Yards after catch. Over the past 3 seasons, he had 2,068 yards after the catch. That's the most in the FBS. And he broke or evaded 77 tackles on those catches, which is the second most in the FBS over the past 3 seasons. The case against him is simple. It's a system offense. His athletic testing numbers were pretty average. His RAS score was 7.76 out of 10. He ran just a hair faster than a 4.5 40. He's 5'11". His shuttle time was average. I don't personally care about that. You flip on the tape, you watch him play. Once he has the ball in his hands, he was victimizing DBs in the CUSA. At 215 pounds, he was just treating them like little children. He'd bowl over people. He would stiff arm people away. He had some nice body control going up and making some circus catches. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and he was named the 2024 Reese's Senior Bowl national team top wide receiver. So that's with all these other great wide receivers on the field. Scouts were very impressed with him. Particularly the one thing I saw in multiple articles, they talked about his acceleration. So 0 to get into moving a little bit, maybe not that 40 time, but in terms of catching a ball at the line of scrimmage and then in 2 steps being at full speed, they really liked what they saw in that regard. I think he's going to be perfectly suited to play in a more wide open system in the NFL, which maybe 15 years ago that would have made him a 5th or 6th round pick. But in today's NFL, there's so many offenses that need his skill set, which is let's spread people out, get our skill position players in space and say, all right, go ahead and beat 1 or 2 guys. He's somebody who's done it consistently. I understand it's Conference USA. There's a lot of poor defensive back play, but he dominated. That's what I want to see, and that's why I think he is going to sneak into the second round here as somebody who really benefited from that, postseason play in the Senior Bowl. So I'm someone who liked him a lot. I think he made Austin Reed look a lot better than he was, and for that reason, I think he was somebody who deserves his flowers, deserves all the accolades and the praise that he's getting. And I think it also helps. Maybe this isn't something that evaluators or NFL teams care about. Rice moving up to the NFL ranks and playing for the Kansas City Chiefs, you can make a lot of similar comments coming out of SMU. Now, SMU is going to be an ACC school moving forward, but at least when he played, it was G5 football. So he had no problem once he got comfortable. In the second half of the year, he was one of the best receivers for the Super Bowl champion. So I think that only helps Corley's case.
Yeah, I have him ranked as wide receiver 10. I'm with you. I think he goes in the second round. I think there's a lot of guys, that are kind of in that range. Tez Walker, I would take Corley over him. To me, the thing I like most about him is when you hear Yak King, you might picture like a Tyreek Hill who just catches and he's gone. Corley will run you over. He's not just a speed guy. He's wicked fast. But for not the biggest guy, he is super strong, super powerful, loves hitting people. He broke 55 tackles over the last 2 seasons. So this was not a yak as he's catching screens, in the flat and just housing it. Or no, he's running over safeties and corners. 55 tackles in 2 years is a lot to break for a slot receiver. He's on the record too. He talks about this all the time. He loves blocking, which is just, give me that all day if you're an NFL offensive coordinator. Loves blocking for his teammates, loves blocking. He said his favorite play in the playbook is a wide receiver screen to the outside receiver behind him. And he loves being able to go out and smack the corner and break his teammate free. That's his favorite play in the playbook. You mentioned the Yak King. I mean, the biggest NFL comp, I'm not making this up. I've seen it from people, but I'm like, that is spot on. He's a poor man's, he could be a poor man's Deebo Samuel, and maybe not even a poor man's Deebo Samuel. Like if he's on like a 49ers if he gets drafted by the Chiefs, oh my God, he's going to be filthy. So I'm with you. I love Corley. Right now, wide receiver 10, you have those first kind of two tiers that probably all go in the first, early second round. To me, he's right up there, and I'd put him right in like that Lad McConkey, Troy Franklin type of guy.
Anybody else on your radar here for the first 2 rounds? That exhausted all the players that I think have a legitimate chance to make it in, which, as we mentioned, is more than last year.
I mean, are we not gonna talk about Michael Pratt?
I don't think so. I think he has backup quarterback written all over him in the NFL. You don't take backups in the second round.
I mean, all right. I mean, we'll see. I mean, Jalen Hurts drafted in the second round.
I think Jalen Hurts was there was a big gulf between Michael Pratt and Jalen Hurts, but we will talk about him at length in our next episode, which is probably available now. If you're listening, go through your feed and you can pull up our second installment in this quick series. We're going to go ahead and talk about all the players who come off the board from G5 land, round 3, all the way through the undrafted free agent portion of, the post-draft process, because those guys can make the difference, particularly when you're a GM. If you're trying to break through, you got to find gold in that round 3 and plus range, because those players come in cheap and they can really upgrade your roster quickly.
And for the record, it was that second episode that we talked about Puka Nacua, who just set the receiving record. We talked about Rashee Rice, who was the leading receiver on the Super Bowl winning team. We talked about Quinyon Mitchell, who had a huge breakout a few weeks before he got hurt. So these guys, they're gonna pop off next year. So if you're if you're in a dynasty league, the next draft is where you're gonna win your leagues, basically.
For Mike Ainello, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM, our Group of 5 deep dive, installment 1 in the NFL Draft preview series. In addition to the second episode, also make sure to tune in next week. I'll be sitting down with Colin Wilson to talk about building your futures portfolio ahead of the College World Series, one of the last opportunities before conference tournament time to be able to add some teams in there. Really interesting in terms of betting futures in that market, because generally speaking, there's 10 to 12 teams that have a legit chance to win the national championship. And as I brought up multiple times, what I love about college baseball is that the top seeds often flame out in the College World Series. They get to Omaha and the pressure is just too big. That creates huge value opportunities if you're holding tickets on some of these teams in the 8-1, 15, 20-1 range. LSU took it home for us last year. We were able to give that out on the pod. So hopefully we have another winner for you in the coming weeks. There's going to be multiple episodes with Colin and myself. All right, please flip on over to part 2 in the G5 NFL Draft Special.